Good morning, everyone. And thank you very much, Marco, for the introduction. I thought I heard you say professor earlier on. Point of correction there, I'm working towards professorship. This morning, I'm presenting on the processes that we as a country in Zimbabwe have followed in trying to operationalize and implement the guidance that came out of the WHO guideline revision process, leading to the release officially of the 2013 WHO guidance. The background of my presentation will really touch on some of our data for the country, a brief on the PMTCT program and our choice of PMTCT regimen, and the process that we followed to come to that decision, and a little bit on the transition and some of the implementation issues that we encounter in trying to fully operationalize the WHO guidelines. So our population in Zimbabwe is 13 million, according to the 2012 census. We have 1.4 million people living with HIV, and this is according to the latest HIV estimates, of whom about 160,000 are children below the age of 15. We have a high prevalence, around 15%, but for the prevention of mother-to-child transmission, we are witnessing a declining transmission rate. And we started off in the base year for the global plan with a transmission rate of 30%, and we are progressively going down. We have a population survey done in 2012 that actually shows that our transmission is down to 8.8%. We are, of course, concerned that we still continue to have new HIV infections among children. So the program in Zimbabwe also for PMTCT is a mature program. We have been implementing activities since 1999, of course initially as a pilot, but much like most of countries represented here, we take our cues from the WHO guideline revision process. So when we started, we were mostly focusing on single dose of nevirapine, but progressively we have also transitioned such that before implementing of the latest guidance, the 2013 one, Zimbabwe was implementing option A of the 2010 WHO guidelines since 2011. We adopted, I think, the option B plus after some processes that I will describe in the following slides. So the evolution of the guidance in Zimbabwe has really been guided by what the normative guidance from the WHO has said over time. And you can see that, we've had probably 3 years at most to implement, but by and large, between guidance, you probably have 2.5 years before the next guidance comes. And I just want to say, when we adopted the option A back in 2011, we had, in 2010, we had some of our academic professors in country who were really at that time even saying, why don't we just do lifelong treatment? So you can imagine when we went through processes now of choosing the regimen for the adaptation and adaptation of the WHO 2013 guidance, what our professors were saying, because they were saying, we told you so. Back in 2010, you probably should have done lifelong treatment anyway. But anyway, that is with hindsight. So we had the programmatic release or the update from the WHO in 2012 that was really reflecting on early lessons coming out of Malawi, which is the country that started off with option B+. So the conversation around the transition didn't just start with the official launch of the WHO 2013 guidelines. We started discussing which regimen to move to after the 2012 programmatic update. And so we convened a stakeholder meeting in February of 2013 before the official launch of the WHO 2013 guidelines. And of course, we shared experiences with the Malawi Ministry of Health official and also with a representative from EGPAF Rwanda, and Rwanda at that time, back in 2013, were implementing option B, but planning on transitioning to option B+. So we had good lessons to learn from people who were doing a bit of both. So participants in these stakeholder consultations really included a very representative cross-section, both from the programmatic perspective, from academia. We also had civil society, we had implementing partners, and the donor community represented in this stakeholder consultation. We then, after the official launch of the WHO 2013 guidance in Malaysia last year, then went through a formal guideline adaptation process. And in our country, this is led by the National Medicines Therapeutics and Policy Advisory Committee, who are responsible really for coming with what we would call the standard treatment guidance for Zimbabwe. We call ours the Essential Medicines List for Zimbabwe, previously, of course, called the Essential Drug List for Zimbabwe, EDLIS. And so, of course, they are also responsible for recommendations pertaining to what we are going to be implementing in Zimbabwe. The NMTPAC, together with the AIDS and TB program of the Ministry of Health and Childcare, then constituted a National Adaptation Steering Committee. And this was a multidisciplinary committee. And under the National Adaptation Committee, we then had 3 steering or 3 subcommittees. We had a subcommittee for adult and adolescent treatment, another one for EMTCT and pediatric HIV, and we had the HIV testing and counseling and HIV prevention subcommittee. And these had separate meetings to try and thrash out issues around which regimen to adopt or which strategy to implement in our country. Of course, there were multiple stakeholder consultations and a final consensus building workshop that then brought all of the deliberations from the 3 subcommittees into one place to try and reach consensus. And we had technical assistance from the WHO, as well as from some of the multilateral agencies, as well as the implementing partners that we are working with in country. And so officially, the guidance was launched in November of 2013. So in making the decision around the choice of PMTCT regimen, I think it was very clear, and seeing the guideline development process that is led by the WHO, where a lot of technical expertise actually sits around the table and inputs and reviews evidence around whatever recommendations are coming. I think for most of us, I think we were quite unanimous in agreeing or accepting those recommendations, of which one of the key benefits was addressing an equity issue around availability of CD4 count. And in our country, about 60% of HIV-positive pregnant women under option A were actually accessing a CD4 count. So what that meant is 40% did not have access to a CD4 count and may have been put on option A when they may actually have needed option B+. So that was a compelling reason for us to transition to option B+. We also considered the advantage of not interrupting treatment and the possibility of development of resistance with multiple treatment interruptions. I think a key observation in our program, we are seeing more and more women that are already HIV positive, and some of them not yet on treatment, others on treatment who are actually coming into the program. And so when we commence them on option A and we interrupt and yet they are not yet on treatment, and then they will need treatment obviously after some time, then we are worried, or were worried at that time, about the possibility of resistance with a start-stop and start-stop approach. And this was, I think, for us, option B+, simpler to implement. And at the same time, the adult group had also recommended fixed dose combination or tenofovir plus lamivudine and efavirenz, which I think the beauty for us is available, co-formulated as one pill taken once a day. So it was very easy for us to agree to those recommendations and move forward with adopting option B+. We felt that, of course, there would be more pediatric HIV infections averted. After all, we were missing out 40% of women without having a CD4 count. And maternal health, I think, is key. In implementing the global plan, keeping women alive is very important, because when we keep women alive, we also secure survival for their infants. And so we felt, I think, together also with the evidence that had come out of the serodiscordant studies, that it is treatment as prevention. When the HIV positive partner is on treatment, we also wanted to take advantage of the benefit of that in the context of PMTCT. So we did have issues to address. We were concerned about the readiness and willingness of women to be on treatment when they are relatively well. We were worried because in our program, we are seeing that retention and adherence under the shorter regimens for PMTCT was not a major area of focus for us. But now with lifelong treatment and keeping women on treatment throughout the breastfeeding period and beyond, we need to focus on retention and adherence. A key question in the various groups that were part of the consultations was what happens to male partners, in the sense that the woman is positive, we are putting them on lifelong treatment. What happens to the men when he tests positive? Is he going to follow the normal guidance, waiting for ART eligibility as defined by a CD4 threshold of 500 or below? And would that not create an equity issue in the context of a relationship? We were also, of course, cognizant of the fact that the fixed dose combination comes with a price tag, but I think the other way of looking at it is how expensive is a pediatric HIV infection to manage, and all of the challenges that we are familiar with trying to treat a child lifelong. So I think the cost for us, we recognize, yes, there would be costs upfront, but in averting a new HIV infection in a child, then you probably are going to be able to be cost-saving in the long run. The scope of practice in Zimbabwe, we have ministry's endorsement for nurses to initiate antiretroviral treatment. We are, of course, still waiting for a written down policy so that nurses are comfortable to initiate, but by and large, it is accepted that nurses can initiate, and that was taken into account. Also important is the fact that we are pushing towards nationwide decentralization of treatment. And so by actually implementing option B+, we are catalyzing also the full decentralization of treatment in our context. We had, of course, to worry about the storage and distribution of antiretroviral treatment drugs, because under treatment, for a facility to store antiretroviral drug, they need to have been assessed, they need to have adequate storage so that we can secure our antiretroviral medications under ideal conditions. So there were key issues that we needed to address. Integrating, like in this case, we made a decision that B+ would be delivered in the context of maternal child health settings. So we had to plan across programs, across treatment, across PMTCT, and across MCH, and then prepare our sites rapidly, and then also engage communities with a new message for lifelong treatment versus the interruption that we were talking about. And so we phased implementation in actually implementing. PMTCT is available in 1,560 sites, whereas treatment at that time was available in 700 sites. So there were 700 sites ready to begin implementation almost right away, and about 800 plus sites that we needed to rapidly prepare so that they could begin implementation of option B+. So we had a phased implementation. We are almost 6 months into the rollout, and we would be doing an interim review of early lessons learned in the early phase of implementation, and that will guide the further rollout of option B+. So in summary, really, we have adopted option B+. We are rapidly preparing all sites for full implementation by the end of this year, and we know that we would have benefits for women and children as we move towards elimination of new HIV infections. We still have to address the issue of male partners, and we are thinking of doing what people have said is option B+M, option B+ for the woman and the M, taking account of the concordant positive male partners, and of course it will be important to monitor pharmacovigilance. So thank you very much. I acknowledge the contributions of all of these people, including various departments in the ministry, the provincial and district officers, the donors and implementing partners, and importantly, the multilateral agencies for helping us in this process. Thank you.